Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back. You've obviously had a very good, interesting discussion in the previous session, so welcome back into the plenary room now, and we're going to hear from Dr. Norman Crowther, who's the ATL National Official for Post-16 Education, and he also tells me I need to say that he's an independent researcher in his own right as well. So over to you, Norman.
Thanks, Charlotte. Probably better to do that now rather than after, but we'll see. It's a real honour to be able to address you today. So I'd like to thank Sheila, David, and the foundation for the work they're doing, but also for the invitation, which I hope I repay their generosity. This is an area I'm really passionate about, so I can't think of a better audience to speak to. So therefore, I hope that what I do say makes sense, and actually, and coming from the workshop we've just been in, also enthuses you and changes practice, because that's what I'm going to talk about. But just quickly, I just wanted to say, something about the whole set of themes that are around research and around CPD and around professionalism in the sector. And I just need to drop in some key moments that I've experienced that I think you'll understand. In 2000, I got a scholarship in a college, a large college, put up scholarships for one term to do research. I thought, I'll do that. That's it. That's great. I can find things out. I want to have some answers. And it was interesting that I looked at at that time there was big debates about benchmarking data and how you assess whether students progressed. And I just thought, what's that about? How do you measure that? How do you measure that movement? And I did some research for the LSDA at that time, the Learning Skills and Development Agency. I was lucky enough to get a commended paper, and it went into a book that actually Anne Thompson and Yvonne Hillier edited. And I went back to the college, and they said to me, we weren't expecting that. We weren't expecting you to come up with any ideas that could change our view of students and their progression. Can you write a toolkit? And I look back at that time, 2000, no real research culture, certainly in the college, and said, I can't do it as teaching as well. It's impossible. There was just the dialogue sort of just filtered out. We didn't know, either of us knew how to progress. And that's something about how you see yourself as a practitioner, what you imagine can happen, and also the delusion that if you find something out, then it must follow that things will happen. Second instance, Yvonne Hillier, I'm playing a big part in my life at the moment. Yvonne Hillier, she was doing research about the college, because at that time most research was HE on FE. It was all about HE doing research on FE rather than FE research as such. And part of her research, and she said to me, I've heard staff talk about all of these limitations and obstacles. What do you do? What do you do about it? And I couldn't answer her. I didn't know what she meant. What do you mean, do? What can I do? What sort of person do you think I am? You've heard all of the obstacles and problems that people say there are, all the constraints. What can I do? And that question haunted me, because I didn't like the answer I gave, that I didn't know, again, about how to change things. Third and final example, research again. HE researcher comes in, asks me a question, and part of the research questions were, why are you teaching in FE? And I said, right, tell my story, interested, great research, yeah. Well, I was doing... what was I doing at that time? I was doing some research at the time to a doctorate. Somebody said there was some part-time work in philosophy. Went to the college, started doing part-time. 10 years later, here I am. And he said, it's funny that, because a lot of the people I've spoken to have said that they fell into it. They fell into the sector. And that's something else that's not left me. And I think there are themes that continue on in that practice, because I've heard conversations since then, up to today, which aren't that different. So, firstly, research, I'm taking it, is a new challenge, and it's about, this time, it's about expertise, and it's about enhancing professionalism. It's another term we've heard a lot. But research is about expertise. It is not a tool that, and I've just heard the conversation, it's not a tool that you can say, we want to do something now, therefore find out a research tool, and now we're going to change things in the college. That isn't research. A research space is related to that issue, but it's not the same. And I hope to show that. Other theme is change, how change happens in the sector. There's a book coming out, edited by Anne Hodgson, The Coming Age of FE. A continual questioning about whether further education is at the place where it should be. Has it matured? Has it developed? What sort of sector is it? The policy steamroller that affects it means that it becomes synonymous with change. People take it as self-evident and obvious in the sector that things will continue to change. Agency, that question that was put to me, how is agency actually formed in a college? Who can do what? Who can do what? And I'm going to address that question about who can do what. Because most of the time, it's directed towards individuals. You as an individual can change something. Of course you can. You can change your practice, but it's limited as to how much impact that's going to have. Impact on practice, the final sort of criteria about any policy or about any agency that works in the sector, what changes on the ground, and that's where I'm coming from. That's the success for me. If I see change on the ground in college practice, that has succeeded. It doesn't succeed in terms of policy, it doesn't succeed in terms of most people like that idea, it doesn't succeed by government saying this is how we should do things and being a part of that conversation. It's about the change in practice in colleges. And finally, policy memory. We've been here before. We're continuing to tread this water of how far we can engage a research culture with the sector and change things. We haven't done that yet. That example I had of the LSDA in 2000, it's the same place we're at. So my aim today is to change all that, or at least to try to start to address these questions in a different way. Firstly, we need to better conceptualise the sector. Get to that, bit grand, we'll get to it. And we need to understand that the real crisis in the sector is, and it always has been, practitioner identity, status and practice. That's the crisis in further education. And I know that a lot of people think that's a strange thing to say, particularly in a challenging economic climate such as it is. But to be honest, all the money in the world, and the Labour government, I think, put quite a bit of it into the sector during that time, didn't change practice. The question is about practitioner identity. My claim is going to be that we can make a difference by developing colleges as expansive learning environments, and research is crucial to that. They're simple statements, but I want to show you how they might take effect. But firstly, see if you recognise this following clip. Take out anything you can. I'm going to ask you to use your imagination, which is a different thing to do. Is use your imagination and think, what in this clip actually reminds me of working in FE? That film, Groundhog Day, it's a part of a set of terms that can be applied to further education. There's a book come out this year, 12 Dancing Princesses, and that's edited by Frank Coffield. And in that book is discussed all of the images that apply to the sector, and they play with those images from the point of view of fairy tales. I think it's interesting that the sector has to apply such imagery, and obviously the setup today is you're not in tables, so I can't ask you to discuss it. I just hope you can engage with the dialogue that movie showed and picked out some elements that are resonant with working in a college, because the literature that you can read starts to point toward something about what I've picked up for this speech today, which is about existential doubt, that you doubt yourself, you doubt the reality around you, you doubt that you can change things, and things start to become a little bit absurd. And this quote here, because I know the lighting isn't very good, is that it says, "Our desire to belong and to believe that the world is an ordered, meaningful reality renders us susceptible to social influence. By conforming to group norms, we affirm membership and meaning, and in turn restrain existential doubt." So the idea is, and obviously the film Groundhog Day is what you could call an existentialist film. The character is going through an existential crisis. They're unsure about what they can change, and they're unsure about the world around them. And that's what's called existential doubt. And in the research literature, I think Giddens calls it ontological insecurity, but it's a questioning of how far you can make your life meaningful. So when you look at FE, and again we've got bad lighting, but I just wanted to take some images that in talking to colleagues over the years, I've heard references to, working in a college is like working in a factory, or it's like being on a campsite, or it's like working in a bank, or it's like being on a cruise ship. And I thought it'd be an interesting question to pose about how you think of a college. What is it like to work in a college? Because so many images and terms are applied to further education sector that makes it a sort of unreal place. That notion of the Cinderella sector, that fantasy image of it, means that there's not a clear understanding or a clear engagement within a college or for practitioners about exactly what the place is that they work in. I'm not going to take any questions at this time, but I'd like you to just think about how you think of that place at college. What is it like? Because it's not like a school and it's not like a university. It's the place in between. It's the only vocational and education training system which is completely, almost uncoupled from a strong relationship to schools and a strong relationship to employers. There are no formal links between those two sectors. No other vet sector has that. So we are a part of a certain select group of vocational education training systems which work differently to others. So when we compare ourselves to other systems, we need to remind ourselves we're doing something a little bit wacky. And it's hard because it means that meaningful reality and order that you inhabit doesn't directly link to employers. It doesn't directly link to schools. There's a space in between. There's a gap that's uncomfortable at times. Now, there are good things about looking for answers. And one of them is that you get partial solutions, or you get something that helps you move on. I think that the Education Training Foundation standards are one such thing because they're aspirational. That means they can fit into a worldview which says, I can change things, I can aspire to do things differently, I want to do things differently. And the research that's been done into the sector and in conversations I've had, people want to do things differently. They do want to change. So if we take the standards, I think one of the problems is, because there are challenges, is that where are they then? Where are the standards in the college? Where are they? Where are the values? Where are the values of the standards? So when the standards talk about values, where are the values in your college? So I go into your college and I say, I know this is an abstract term, I know it sounds a bit wacky, but show me where the values are. Where do they come from? Where are they evident? I asked the same thing about skills. Where are the skills? Where are the skills that the standards talk about? Where can I find them? Who has them? Who has ownership of them? Who expresses them? Which ones are most important? Academic, vocational, levels 1, 2 and 3, levels 4, 5 and 6. Where is it? Where's the priority in terms of skills? And finally, in terms of knowledge, who has the knowledge? Where is the knowledge that the standards talk about? Where are they? Who has got the authority to talk about knowledge? Who says they know how things are in the college? And this is where you come in, because obviously those questions you can explore and answer in terms of research. You can explore how skills are transferred in the workplace or in a classroom. You can talk about the different types of knowledge that can be passed on or that research itself develops. You can look at the very value of research and why it's important to actually try to understand something before you then implement it or apply it. The thing is, though, is that I don't think standards are inherent in an individual. I think an individual's part of them. But if you said to me, oh, Norman, you got it wrong about the standards, they're all in us, in each and every one of us. We all carry them. We've got the values, we've got the skills, we've got the knowledge. What? And they're like, you're like boxes? You're like boxes with the standards in? Everybody's got the same set of standards? Everybody relates them in the same way? Is that how they work? I don't think they work like that, and I think that's been a misjudgment about professionalism, that it's based upon individualism. Of course, individuals are a part of those standards, but I think the standards assume a community of practice. Expertise is shared. You observe it, you discuss it, and it's acknowledged. It's not something subjective that we can hold on to. And I think communities of practice provide a sense of belonging, that sense of belonging that practitioners need. It's not just about you on your own. You're part of a community where you share resources, you share a vocabulary, and you have common concerns. That is a fundamental part of research. A research culture can do that, but it hasn't developed at college level. So I think that those communities can help overcome existential doubt. I think those communities can make everybody feel a lot better because you have a sense of belonging and it's clear about what everybody is doing. We do have the same purpose. It's visible and evident. In order to do that, though, you need an expansive learning environment. And I think the research shows that this is the best form of environment to work in. So my next question, of course, always is, so why don't we do it? Or how do we do it? If you map on the elements of a community of practice onto the professional standards, you then get a slightly different picture. You get the picture that the values that the standards talk about are actually a part of your identity. These are the values I share. I want to teach young people. I want to teach learners. One of the surveys that we did, what came back massively was that practitioners wanted to transform young people's lives. They wanted to transform learners' lives. It was their identity. They weren't happy unless they did that. That identity is about the value of education. So the two are connected, identity and values. And then when we talk about skills, in order to have skills and develop them, you have to have resources. You can have as many skills as you like, but if it's the case that the budget says that there are no resources, you immediately have a limitation about what you can do. So resources which belong to a community of practice or an environment of working are related to skills. Skills do not operate simply in what you can do. They are part of a sharing of resources. And finally, in terms of knowledge, knowledge again, if we can rid ourselves of it being housed in the individual head, it's a part of a shared vocabulary. Knowledge is what you can say to other people, it makes sense to other people, they can respond to it, and they can work together. That's how knowledge transforms within a community of practice. On its own, knowledge is simply a set of statements or propositions. It's not actually a real thing about your practice, but it is if it's placed within a community. So the opportunity is that. And here's a quote from Engstrom that Alison Fuller and Lauren Unruh have taken. We speak of expansive learning or third-order learning when a community of practice begins to analyse and transform itself. That's what research does. It analyses and transforms the things around it. Such expansive learning is not anymore limited to predefined contents and tasks. It is a long-term process of redefining the objects, tools, and social structures of the workplace. That is a hell of a project. That's a hell of a project to say that an expansive learning environment, and you know, I'll be a little bit provocative, an expansive learning environment on these terms is not Wednesday afternoons off. It's not. It's about redefining the objects, tools, and social structures of the workplace. The place will look very different. You couldn't even imagine it being like a factory, like a bank, like a cruise ship, like a campsite. It would look and feel different. And then the difficulty, because research tells us what we might expect to see or understand. And the view is that approaches expansive, that's the good things, or restrictive, not necessarily bad, sometimes you have to be restrictive, but expansive or restrictive are the product of deeper historical, socio-cultural, organisational, economic processes. Big factors, which it is hard for an externally conceived and essentially bolt-on intervention to penetrate. LSDA, LSIS, LSC, you name them, LLUK, IFL, these agencies have got short lives for a particular reason, that they're bolt-ons. But there's also another reason here, which this quotation doesn't touch. Sometimes it can be the internal structures that stop it happening as well. In a restrictive model of CPD, just in case you're not familiar with it, but I think you should be familiar with it because you should understand how your workplace is shaped, because that's going to affect the type of research you do and why you do it. A restrictive mode of CPD, it focuses on the role and the tasks in hand. It develops skills solely related to the job. It's imposed from the institution. It's got no wider experience of other areas. There's no credible claim for CPD outside of strategically we need to do X, Y, and Z. Anything else is not credible as a suggestion. So there's little innovation, and it's ad hoc at best research and development. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a very simple diagram of the college. It's directly linked to the CPD on offer. That's directly linked to the particular role that you have, and personal development. You might be lucky. In an expansive model of CPD, and this is the shift now. So what I've been talking about so far, this is the shift of a community of practice of this type. You do have visible and acknowledged access to CPD. It is evident. I've been in lots of colleges. It's not evident to me. I have to say, it's not evident about where the access to CPD is, who does it, who belongs to it. There are defined and shared opportunities, there's legitimate and transparent protocols, there's sustainable structures which are convergent with communities of practice, and there's consultative proposals for research and development. And I know some of you will be thinking, I thought this was about research. Research is about practice, it's about analysing the things around you, and if you want to have an impact on the things that happen around you, you have to have some form of organisational dialogue. There has to be a dialogue of sorts. If you want your research to be yours, to progress on to HE, fantastic. If you want to actually change the culture around you, if you want to change the practice around you, you have to then enter a different space, which is a dialogue now with others. And this is the dialogue now, I imagine, that the expertise of you as practitioners is yours. You know about teaching and learning. Management know about logistics, they know about funding, they know about the strategic purposes of the organisation. They do not have your expertise. That dialogue now has to be created if things are going to change. A professional group, a professional occupational group does not say, you tell me what entry a student should have in order to go onto this programme. You tell me how many should be in the class. You tell me how the timetable should be ordered. I'm not saying it's all one way. I'm saying it's about a dialogue. And that dialogue has to be founded on your expertise. So in an expansive model of CPD, what you have is participation. It's not compulsory. It's a community practice. It's participation. There are institutional arrangements which that community talks about, and there's then the benefit of personal development. It's about what you put in as to what you get out. But the crucial thing is it's a collectivity. So my view is, and this is the real story underpinning a lot of these problems, is that professionalism, it should be conceptualized as a strategic field. A strategic field is when agents are contesting and vying for resources. Within colleges, since incorporation, there's been a logic to their patterns of behaviour, and it's not really been explicitly talked about. We talk about it in terms of funding or strategic purposes. But actually, incorporation, which was initiated by the state, colleges didn't advocate for it. I think it's had a detrimental impact on the FE workforce. It has caused, in turn, existential doubt. And this is the reason why, is that incorporation prioritised, and this has been happening now for 20-odd years, so you're inhabiting a space that has done this. Incorporation prioritised financial management, efficiency and outcomes. That's what it did. That's all it did. It's a bit like a Terminator. It's doing its job. So I'm not knocking it, it's just doing its job. But that's what it was doing. What it left too many unorganised social spaces. And you'll be surprised to know what those unorganised social spaces are, but maybe you won't. Research, professionalism, curriculum development, even student composition. None of these was about incorporation. Colleges do not sit around and think, what type of student should we get? They think, what's the funding stream for that particular student? They do not think, we'd like to know more about us as an organisation. We'd like to research and engage with HE. We'd love to do that. No, we haven't got time or money for that. We'd love to support professionalism, but we haven't got time or money for that. The thing is, it's not about the time or the money. There is no vocabulary for it within a college. There's very little vocabulary. So finally, the reason why there's an insert in your sheet is not because I'm trying to recruit on behalf of ATL. It's about a model that is genuinely for you about your CPD. And if you notice, what it says is, it's a space that only you can develop. So what the fact sheet describes, so just get around the fact, if you're not in a union or whatever, get around the facts from a trade union. It describes a space that you can develop within your college. And it's a space for FE professionals. It's not for SMT, it's not for managers, it's not for trade unions. It's not for any other interest. It's for your space, it's for your professional practice. It's not for any of those bodies or agencies to tell you what pedagogy should be. It's nothing to do with those other interests about what research you should follow, how you should relate to your students, what sort of assessment you should do. Those are not of interest to those other bodies, and yet they constrain you in different ways. So finally, that community of practice for practitioners then enables you to engage with managers, trade unions, ETF, other networks. It enables you to do that. The hard thing is, it's unorganised social space. It does not live in your college. You have to develop it. And as part of these sorts of events, you can certainly share in the ideas and involvement and enthusiasm of those around you. But your task is to go back into your college to try to take that forward. My suggestion is that you can only do that if you create a new space, a community of practice, fundamental to research, which enables you to have a dialogue with your management. And that will be over to you. So I hope some of that has made sense, and I hope that you can enjoy the rest of the day. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Norman. I hope you found that interesting, and you've left us with a number of very interesting questions to contemplate there. For example, are we unsure about what we can change and how we can change it within our institutions, be they college, offender learning, independent providers? We do actually have a Q&A session for both Norman and Lorna at the end of the day. So perhaps you could make a note of your questions that you have at the moment, but I think we've probably got time just for one or two questions if there are immediate things that you'd like to put to Norman. Are there any questions for Norman? Yeah.
So, you know, when you talk about FE, who are we? Yeah. Well, actually, we're adult community learning, not college. Yeah. So, you know, people always refer at these sort of seminars to the college. Well, actually, we're adult community learning, and we're a whole band of people that are engaged in different activities.
Thank you for that. I think that's absolutely right, and that's a part of the confusion. Sorry. That's a part of the confusion of the sector about what it is and how does it fulfil its key function. And I think that if it was much sharper, and if we'd have thought about these things more deeply, I think the actual when we talk about colleges, we should be talking about vocational education and training. The other areas, we should have specific areas. So I apologise for the focus on colleges. You're completely right.
Has anybody got an immediate question for Norman before we break for lunch? Or otherwise, can you make a note of the points that Norman's flagged for you, and we can deal with them when we have the Q&A later today?